Steve, is John coming? Or,
He is not, no.
okay.
He's off today.
Okay, this is the December 1st meeting of the Fire Station Building Committee. We'll launch right into the agenda. First item is, as always, public comment. I don't see anyone on the line, so no public comment tonight. So we'll go into our first main agenda item. Please discuss Eversource presentation regarding utility incentives, architect sustainability approach, GGD, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, mechanical and electrical presentation, updated site zoning limitations and concept plans, and initial budget review. So I think those were the 5 items Dora Whittier and Vertex had listed. I don't know if you want to go in any particular order, but I'll turn it over.
Yeah, actually, could we do the plans first?
Sure.
Because I think the most interesting thing of tonight is going to be the plans.
Okay. So you don't want to save that for last?
I don't want to save that for last. And, you know, the goal, if it's possible, would be for us to be able to get a direction tonight in terms of, you know, which option you think is going to best fit the community.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to pull up, so we sent some plans right before the holiday for everyone to look at. So I have those here, but we also have some updates that we want to share with you as well. So I thought I would start with the ad reno version, since everybody is familiar with the existing building. So the idea here would be, this would be a full gut renovation of the existing building. Everything would come down, probably similar approach to possibly what you went through with the police station, where you would be gutting everything down to the structure. Slabs would come out in order to bring in utilities. Yeah, oh, thank you. And to bring this up to a Category 4 building for public safety. So to start with, we would try to keep the existing footprint as intact as possible. So the front door is in this location. We would try to keep that. The street is on the top side of the screen here, so we're looking approximately north. And what we've done is we've reconfigured this and zoned it. So basically what you see in red would be administrative spaces, green would be publicly accessed spaces, the yellow-orange would be living spaces, and then everything else in pink down here would be operational spaces. So off the front door, you'd have a reconfigured lobby with a triage room, a couple bathrooms, and access to a training room that'd be used by the fire station and potentially also for the public, with some breakout storage rooms. You'd also have adjacent access to all of the administrative spaces, with the living functions filling out the existing apparatus space. So the apparatus space would be converted to this training area and living quarters, with a kitchen, dining, day room back here and a fitness room. Everything that would be operations related would be built new, adjacent to the existing station. That's everything that you see back here. So that would be the apparatus bays and all of the support spaces. In addition, there'd be a small second floor area with a training mezzanine, mechanical space, and a training stair. So the overall square footage of this is just under 26,000. One of the benefits here is that there's not a full second floor build out, so you do not have an elevator, you do not have a second stair, you do not have horizontal circulation on a second floor. However, the downside to that is that when a call comes in, if the staff is in the living quarters, they have a very long route to take to get from their spaces into the apparatus bay and the operational spaces. This is potentially slowing them down beyond what they currently operate at, potentially a further distance even than the existing trailer that's out back. So there are some downsides to that. The program does basically fit within that existing space plus the new addition. The training room is downsized a little bit from the program. The idea was to have a 40-person training room. We were able to get in up to about 32 people. The rest of the program has been incorporated, though. Any questions about the ad reno, just from a programmatic planning standpoint?
I just had one general question.
Mhm.
So, yeah, when I looked through the three options, this obviously had the smallest square footage of the three. So is there program missing from this one, or spaces missing from this one that aren't in the other ones, or is it just by chance a more efficient layout?
Right, great question. It ended up not coming down to efficiency so much, but it's the lack of elevator machine room, second stair, and horizontal circulation on the second floor. That was the big difference. One of the plans I have to show you today actually will be smaller in footprint than this building. We were able to optimize the efficiency to get it even smaller.
Okay.
Great question. So this is the east-west version, and this shows a fully new construction building, and it's located so that it's fully set behind the existing building so that operations can continue during construction. So we would stay out of the way of the existing building. Color-wise, everything is very similar. Green is public. Anything down here in pink is operation-related, and then on the second floor would be all of the administrative spaces. Functionally, you have a lobby with direct access to a training room, just like in the ad reno version, but this is full size, so this meets the program capacity of 40 people rather than the reduced size. One of the benefits here is it brings the triage room, the front lobby, directly adjacent to the apparatus bays. So when the public comes in, they can be brought in on tours, or if they need access for triage, they have that direct relationship to the apparatus bays. You've got 4 full-length apparatus bays plus 2 shorter apparatus bays for some of the smaller vehicles, all of the support spaces in the back and along the side. And then on the second floor, just to orient yourself, stair and elevator from the first floor come up here. Again, the street is along the front. And you have the full admin suite on the second floor. So you've got an administrative assistant that would be the greeter on the second floor, with the chief and deputy chief directly adjacent to that, EMS, some of the other admin spaces, fire prevention. And in this scenario, we were able to put together a larger joint, sorry about that, let me take that off. A larger joint office area that's open for EMS, emergency management, company officer, and shift commander. And then we have the rest of the living spaces. So we have fitness, kitchen, dining, day room, and then all of the sleeping rooms along the rest of the space, with a large mechanical space in the middle, training mezzanine directly off the training stair, and that opens to the apparatus below, so they can put in ladders within the building, do some training right inside the building, which is really nice. So the square footage on this option, we were able to get it down to 25,720, so even smaller than the ad reno version. Any questions on this one? I know I'm going through these pretty fast. Okay.
Is there time to come back later and
Oh,
discuss them? or is this-
absolutely. And the third option is a north-south orientation. This places the building adjacent to the existing fire station, but brings it all the way up towards the street, so you have a little bit closer street presence. However, there are some negatives that go along with this plan. From a space efficiency standpoint, this one is less efficient, partially due to the shape. By angling the building in order to try to get some of the apparatus bays to have better access to the street, you have some less efficient spaces that you end up with in the middle. This is a split plan, so you end up with some of the administration on the first floor, some of it on the second floor, and training room on the second floor as well, along with the living spaces. Programmatically, all the same spaces are here, but they're just divided up a little bit differently. The other downside to this is, from a site layout standpoint, the public who would come and access this building would likely end up having to park right out front here towards the street. We think we can maybe get in about 10 public parking spaces there. The rest of this all would be apron for the apparatus bays, with overflow parking on the opposite side of the apparatus bays. So if a public meeting were to happen in that training room, you may be able to get about 10 people up front. Everybody else would have to park here and then walk to the sidewalk or cross over the apron to get to that front door. And then staff would park in the back. So from a site layout standpoint, this is much less efficient than the previous option. And in this option, you have a lot of room where the existing building sits for public parking. Staff parking would be in the back here, and you have a much better apron where training can be done. Apparatus have plenty of room to be pulled out and worked out here. That doesn't necessarily happen on some of the other plans. And this is also the largest option at almost 29,000 square feet.
Did you consider any sort of option where it was more linear and that was just kind of dismissed just because of the access to Main Street?
Yeah, that's a great question. So early on, we had talked about it, and from an operational standpoint, having the apparatus bays all face away from the street was a little more problematic, partially visually for the town to be able to see the apparatus bays, but also just getting out of the apparatus bays and making that turn is a little more difficult. So from the department standpoint, it was preferred to try to angle these closer to the street.
Unfortunately, fire apparatus really aren't getting much smaller.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make a 90-degree turn?
Yeah, so, and I actually drew on some experience I had previously. We had a station that was in Tennessee that was built with that orientation where the bays didn't face the street. And our tower ladder, we chewed up the tires in less than a year. We had to replace all of the rear tires.
Wow.
Because that turn, even on a nice concrete pad, it just chewed up the tires. So even though we tried to rotate it away, it just chewed up the tires. So it ended up creating that issue, for us.
Any thoughts or comments on any of the three?
So Chief, maybe you want to talk a little bit about which one you prefer? I don't know if that would help everybody in terms of, because they've been working on this really hard in terms of getting the layouts right.
Yeah, I think, the work group meetings have been really good. They've been very insightful. We've had a lot of, opinions and also desires and wants, but also, focusing on the needs. And I think having the expertise of the architects and our OPM in their previous experiences kind of highlighting things that, help reduce cost, if you will, in terms of tightening up the building envelope, tightening up the example, the roof spaces and things. We really, after conferring with the staff, and we prefer this version here, the east-west orientation with the bays, facing out to the street, and also having that community room / training room on the first floor, and all administrative and basically all of the operations and living space of the department upstairs. We did discuss some of the potential challenges or potential challenges or drawbacks to having all of the administration upstairs or all of the operation upstairs, as well as the potential pros, because we felt like the training room, we felt like it was an important piece of what we need in the program, but also wanted that space to be available because there's a shortage of spaces in town for meetings such as this or other civic organizations and things of that nature. We wanted to embrace the fact that this is a community building and it is the town's building, and have accessibility for that training room to be used for other town departments. We met with the police chief yesterday, and it's something that they would be looking to take advantage of for certain in-service training and classes. So in doing that, we isolate that public area from the areas that need to stay secure or where we don't need people kind of trouncing through, and it grants some accessibility into the building. And then we thought about the way the operation and the flow of business would take place, and it really wouldn't be much of an adjustment from how it's done now, with the exception of, having to go upstairs or be in an elevator. But the process of when someone comes into the vestibule or the lobby would be the same, as far as having to be buzzed in or being greeted by someone from the department to come handle their business. That process would not change. In actuality, in many cases, it would be more efficient because people won't be trouncing from the trailer all the way out back, all the way to the front to let people in. They would still be under the same roof, and just it'd be a matter of coming down the stairs of the elevator and handling business that way. The other part, we do like the idea and think it's more community friendly and welcoming to have the apparatus facing Main Street and to have the bays facing Main Street. Obviously, it gives us better line of sight when we're pulling out. There's no blind spots. We don't have to worry about missing any traffic in either direction. So that's a great positive. And I think this layout also gives us, the efficiency of the space and the flow of the space. In the one example with the angled, there's some storage rooms that are triangular, things like that. I don't know if we'd be able to maximize the use of that space. And one of the things that, I expressed to our architects is that I want this to be as functional and as tight and as multifaceted as possible. We want to be able to use this building for everything. We want to be able to train. We want to be able to live and carry out our day-to-day operations. And I think we were able to accomplish that, or they were able to accomplish that, and kind of embrace what our vision was in this smaller, tighter package, which also is helpful. I think we've cut over 5,000 square feet, but not lost any functionality or program through the process of these work groups, and just really, kind of ironing down and sharpening the pencil on certain things in certain areas, and the various spaces that we know we need. So I think that's where we came up, or came to the conclusion that this is the best option, for us as a town and as a department.
I did jot down some notes of a couple of the different alternatives. I think I agree with you. I kind of like this one best. One, because the square footage did seem to be the most efficient, and apparently it's gotten even more efficient. But from what you said, just having that straight shot to Main Street, and then I think even looking at, the construction phase, maybe I'm wrong in this, but it looked like there would be more laydown space available to the contractor during construction between the apparatus bay and Main Street, whereas kind of the north-south orientation really kind of ate up with the existing building there. There's almost no space left really on the site. One thing I did find interesting though on the north-south one was that there was some future expansion area. I guess one question I had for this one, okay, so it looks like something's been added now that there's some, I was asking where that might be accommodated in this option. Okay. So is that that's over a structure already being built?
Correct.
Okay, so it'd be a second floor on top of that.
So this would be built to be able to support the second floor.
Yep.
I guess I have a couple thoughts from a larger town planning perspective. Maybe I'll skip the detailed thoughts, but first thought is we are in the business district, so the design review board will have a say on what goes on here. Just talking out loud might be interesting to get them in sooner rather than later. Some of the things we commonly talk about with projects in town are not presenting, granted maybe it's residential, not presenting the garage as the primary focus of the building. Maybe you can make your case that in the case of a fire station, it really is the primary face of the building, so maybe that's,
People running out need to get on something.
yeah, maybe that's moot in this case, but I guess where I'm going with that is the fact that the main entrance sort of recedes from the street isn't what I would say welcoming to the community. So, and to me, this looks a little bit like a block diagram that hasn't quite found its architectural form yet, right?
You're absolutely right. This is diagrammatic at this stage for feasibility.
So, I was, coming in, I was a little bit partial to the one that was angled for a couple of reasons. One, I like its street presence right up on the street. I think there's a lot of value to that. And, two, I think it just formally has the potential to be a nicer building. So I have some comments on that one too. But I think, looking at this one, oh, the other thing I meant to mention is having parking lots as front yards. Right, we're headed down a scenario here where the front yard's gonna be a parking lot, right? So, you know, understanding that the apron needs to be there, but maybe we could be more creative with the actual parking lot so that it's not just a paved expanse of nothingness. But I think if we move some of these blocks around a little bit without losing the efficiencies and the adjacencies, I think you can get the form to a place that's gonna be happier. I think you can pull the entrance forward. In terms of the functionality of the drive-through bays, I was under the impression that it would be a better use to have the larger trucks going through the drive-through bays. In this case, it's the smaller cars that are in the drive-through bays.
I can speak to that. So the goal of the way, in some of the discussion we had on the bays, is none of our large apparatus exit through the rear of our current station. Everything that comes out of the back is a smaller piece. So it's either one of actually it's the squads and the second ambulance right now. So the way this building is oriented on the site, we can make the turns and maneuver the smaller apparatus with those pull-through bays, where with the larger, it'd be very challenging to try to pull the ladder or one of the engines out of the back on the way this site is, as it would be now. We can maneuver our engine now, you know, from the rear bays around, and, you know, we can drive a circle around, just drive through the parking lot. There's no way we'd be able to back in and pull an engine out, you know.
Yeah, so I guess I'm remembering a past life where I thought the benefit of having the drive-through bays wasn't necessarily to have two exits, but it was to be able to drive your larger trucks in. So you were always going in nose first
So,
with your truck.
yes, in a perfect world, that would be great. That would mean we'd have to have 8 full pull-through bays. So the building would become significantly larger if we wanted to accomplish that. Because we would have to have 5 dedicated bays just for large apparatus. And then the smaller apparatus could be stacked because those are easy to maneuver, but, you know, it would make the building significantly larger, footprint anyway. We actually did talk about that. That was one of the first things we discussed in one of the first meetings was, you know, from my perspective, from a safety point of view, from a exposure point of view, if you will, yeah, it's much safer to be able to just say, hey, we're gonna have dedicated pull-through bays and everybody's just gonna nose in. But the reality is, that's not usually a luxury a small town has, because, you know, we're not Boston or a big city department where most stations have one piece of apparatus. It's easy to do that when you got one engine, or just one engine and a ladder, and that's all you got. I gotta house my entire fleet under one roof. So that brings with it its own challenges, and that is the reason. And right now, quite honestly, if we have the appropriate floor space, it is literally 100 times safer than what you have seen and what you witnessed in our current bays. So when we have the bays laid out with the appropriate spacing, it's not really gonna be, the issues or fears that I have and the safety concerns really are engineered out of
So they're not really drive-through bays, they're really double exit bays.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, in essence, yeah, but we could,
If you
but
needed to.
we have the flexibility to make them a drive-through bay if need be, like, you know, if we procure a new Quint, for example, and we see that, hey, it's problematic backing this thing in, or we can now use it as a, well, maybe not, we won't be able to maneuver around the building, but, you know, just having the flexibility was something that was brought up that was important to the staff and personnel, because it's something that we do now, like we move squads, we move ambulances, you know, I hate to say, but it's part of the way we adapt and overcome, when we have to bring in a reserve ambulance, let's say from one of our partnering communities, if we have an ambulance down, we have to jockey the equipment around to make sure it can fit. So having that flexibility, at least in some of the bays, was really important, you know, and then based on the season, like during heavy fire season, we may move both ambulances to coming out of the back, so we can move the tank up front because it's going out more often than it does in the winter. Like those kind of things, we wanted to have that kind of flexibility to make the operation smoother. And that, you know, hopefully we can alleviate having to jockey equipment around if we have the floor space, we don't have to do that.
So I guess one more detailed comment, again, being a public building and having no reception on the first floor seems problematic. So I like the idea of having all the admin space on the second floor, but I think you gotta have some sort of a desk or
So we talked about that
reception nook or something.
a little bit today, that our station now really, and most stations, not that it makes it more friendly, but most stations have some type of a setup with an intercom or a camera and a screen or something, because really it's a public safety building, and you're limiting who goes into it and how far they go. We had a spirited conversation this afternoon about, do they only get into the vestibule? Do you get into the vestibule to be able to go to the bathroom 24/7, just during work hours? Are you gonna put someone down there away from everybody else just so you feel like you have a presence, but that's only for maybe 40 hours a week? It's not all the time. So,
I think that was one, Light's exactly right. We've had several conversations dating back to probably 2 meetings ago, because as we were exercising these, one of the things that I was concerned about is having a public accessible building that could be accessible after normal business hours for a civic meeting or something on the same floor with my, you know, the day-to-day operation of the fire department, which is, you know, that to me creates more limitations. And when we really thought about how we interact with the public currently, like I said, it's really not a change other than your stairs or an elevator. That's it. Like the way the public comes in, the way we greet them really doesn't change at all. Like right now, after hours, you go to the station, you're gonna be sitting in the vestibule with the camera thing in front of you, and they have to buzz you in, or dispatch has to call us back in the trailer, and you gotta wait for us to walk from back to the trailer to come let you in. And even if we're in the building, in the war room, if you will, that we call it, it's the same thing. There's a door alarm that when somebody comes into the lobby, it goes off and alerts either the admin assistant or myself or whoever happens to be inside the building, hey, someone's here, and we go greet them. So they can't really get anywhere into the station except for in the vestibule lobby, period, anyway. And we also took that from Franklin Fire Department, the layout's the same, Sharon Fire Department, the layout's the same, and even Walpole with their new building, even though it's not 2 floors, the process is the same. So you come into a small lobby, and there's like one of those little phone box things, and you push it, and the admin can see you and decide whether they want to let you in or not. You have to be buzzed in. Otherwise, you're just sitting in a box that happens to have a small bathroom in their lobby, but in essence, it's the exact same layout as this. It's a vestibule with a small lobby with the bathroom off. It's almost the exact same.
So if I'm a local group and I wanna have a meeting at the fire station and I have 25 people coming to my meeting that night, does that mean all 25 people have to be buzzed in through this process?
No, because the way the training room and lobby are set up, it can be isolated from the remainder of the building. So they can come in and have access to the bathroom, the lobby, and the training room, and nothing else. And then if it's, happens to be a patient, you know, that's coming in, you know, again, they're gonna probably use the emergency phone or whatever methodology we have for communicating to the crews. Or we'll get a notification from dispatch, hey, you got a patient in the lobby. We'll go down, take them into the triage room, you know, have them in a private area where we can work on them. And then one of the things that was important to us, when we flipped this around a bunch, was having the triage room right off of the bays, so we could literally take the gurney and roll them right to the ambulance and go, as opposed to having, you know, to trounce through a lot of things. It makes the flow very efficient.
There'd have to be a protocol for a public meeting. Hi, the Girl Scouts are having a meeting tonight. They're gonna know that the doors are open, they can get in these spaces, and if they need something else, they'll know how to reach somebody in the building, you know, or to get anything else they might need.
Yeah, that's one of the things we discussed with the police chief too. Basically, this green area is the only area that will be, like even that door, they won't be able to just walk into that triage door. Even though it says green is a public area, it's gonna be secured until we escort someone in there. But basically, this green area is isolated from everything else. And if there's a public event, for example, after business hours, and even during normal business hours, the stairs and the elevator aren't accessible without being either buzzed in or escorted by someone from the department. So I think in some ways it makes us more intentional about, you know, greeting the public, because right now sometimes, you know, during non-business hours or during business hours we leave a door chalk in the door if we know somebody's coming. And when they come in and we hear the buzzer, we just say, hey, we just wave them in. There's not really an interaction. So I think in some ways it's probably better for us. I know it's more secure. That's one of my biggest you know, fears and things about the way things are now, is that, you know, it's not necessarily the most secure site, you know, especially for the amount of capital investments that are housed in the building. It's not the most secure.
So can we flip to the other option?
Option 3?
So, could we solve some of the inefficiency issues by rotating it even further? Take the apparatus bay and rotate it another 30 degrees north?
So part of the problem is the existing building here. Keeping out of the way of that for construction.
Rotate it and slide it back?
Yeah, potentially, right, and pull this away from the street a little bit more. But what we found is the more you pull this away.
I'm not thinking, sorry to interrupt. I'm not thinking keeping the same shape,
Mhm.
right? I'm literally just talking about rotating the apparatus bay, reorganizing the spaces in pink, and maybe even creating some sort of a courtyard for the staff to use, like an
Okay.
exterior space for the staff to use, right?
Okay, so more of an L shape,
Yeah, I guess,
right?
with some exterior space. It wouldn't all be interior. I mean, I recognize making an L would be much larger, but the elbow of the L could be negative space rather than positive space, additive space.
It's certainly something we can look at.
I don't know what that does functionally with the cars. I mean, you now have your smaller cars coming out at your larger trucks. I don't know if that's an issue.
Coordination.
Yeah. Don't want everybody pulling out at the same time, running into each other.
Well, and part of it is also vertical circulation, right? Making sure that there's enough connection that someone can come down a stair here or down a pole and have direct access to those apparatus bays. So the further apart you pull those, the more problematic that vertical circulation becomes between them. And so maybe it's adding another stair or something like that to offset that.
One of the things that I thought was an advantage about this orientation, really just from a site perspective, is it looked like this positioned most of the building over where the rock has been largely removed. And so I'm wondering if the east-west orientation, has that been looked at all, like how much, if there's some difference in the amount of rock that might need to be removed for this alternative versus?
So it's not showing here, but our understanding is that in this area, we don't believe that there's a lot of rock. We won't know for sure until we get in there. But based on what we do know, what's been exposed, what's already been worked on, we don't think that it's there.
The nice thing about this is it's further back from the street, so we won't have to take out any rock because we can raise the grades. And so we're just gonna raise the grades up, and so we avoid that. And I think what we're showing here is underneath the pink area is where some of that rock was removed. You had 3 different rock areas that were removed. Whereas the other north-south, it is sort of, again, outside those areas. But because the building is so close to the street, we don't have that opportunity to raise the grades unless we have some kind of sloped walkway that starts from the beginning and goes over to but we've got the apparatus base right there. So it just becomes a little bit more complicated in terms of how the site's graded from the street up. We should also mention that this is gonna be a tall building, right? So that first floor is 22 feet, floor to floor. And then we've got at least.
For the whole thing?
The whole first floor.
Just the first floor,
Yeah.
yes. And then,
Is that-
because of the apparatus bays, and we wanna kinda simplify the structure.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what you were getting at, is could you step it at all, right, the apparatus bays be taller?
We could, but then we've got into situations where the elevator would have to have multiple stops, or we'd get into some steps and ramping inside the building. Because we wanna make sure we're being as efficient as possible with having space over the first floor. So that second floor really kinda wants to stack.
We had a previous option that we can go back and look at that had the training room on the first floor, and that was a one-story piece out front. But there were a lot of things here that needed to be worked through and that didn't work so well. You didn't get any drive-through bays on this option, and there were other things here that need to be re-looked at. So whether or not we could make that work is a possibility, but we don't know. We're bringing a one-story piece out front again.
Yeah, and with the first floor being 22 feet floor to floor, and then at least 14 feet above that, sort of having it set back, and remember, we have to have pitched roofs that face the road. So, as we start designing the massing of this, I think having it set back a little bit may be a good thing. And then I think with this piece right here, you can see that the building is pretty much on the west side of the site. So the east side of the site, because of the turning radiuses and everything else, is gonna have a lot more asphalt.
I'm hung up on this 22-foot floor to floor. That's a ton of wasted volume. Is that common?
Yes.
If I can, I think the average height of an apparatus in America right now is like approaching 13 feet.
Well, I mean, the apparatus bay, I get it, but it seems silly, it seems wasteful to have the rest of the building.
So you have to be able to
22-foot
work
high
on top of the
ceiling.
apparatus to maintenance things that are up there, so you don't want someone in a space that's like, they only have 18 inches worth of space to work, and then I don't know what the thickness of like the bar joists or anything like that is, but I don't think that's a
But
crazy
you're
height.
saying just the apparatus bay, Joseph, right?
Just the apparatus
Yeah,
bay,
I'm not arguing the apparatus bay should be shorter. I guess what I'm arguing is the apparatus bay might wanna be its own volume.
But I don't think you're gonna have like 22-foot ceilings in the bathroom on floor 1.
No,
Or-
right.
Well, you're not gonna have 22-foot ceilings, you're gonna have 12 feet of nothing.
Yeah, right.
A more efficient approach would be to not have this space in the middle, right? You'd have all of your apparatus bays together as 22 feet.
You
And
can fit
then,
2 floors in 22.
typically, we go 14 feet floor to floor in order to get structure and mechanical systems to work. But this layout wouldn't be very efficient when you're going multi-stories like that, because as Ron mentioned, you're gonna need multi-elevator stops, possibly multiple elevators, ramps within the building in order to manage all that. We did that in Dedham, and we were able to make it work because it was police and fire. Everything on the fire side was 22 feet on the first floor, everything on the fire was lower, but they were separated.
Where are the multiple levels coming from? You still only have 2 levels.
Right, but if you have 22 feet here and 22 feet here, and everything else around and in between would be lower if you don't go 22 feet.
You have a first floor and a second floor.
Right, but they would be different, you'd still be above the 22 feet also.
Because the green second floor would be higher than the red second floor.
Correct, there'd be two different
That's
heights
because
here.
we're trying to make this plan do something it wasn't designed to do. I wouldn't be arguing to make this plan do that. I would be arguing the apparatus bay should be its own volume.
Right,
And everything else should go in a different volume,
something like this.
yes.
But then where do you put, I mean, above all that right now is the living space and some of the admin space, so where do you put those if you don't put them there? Above the pink?
So we completely understand. I think what is being suggested is if you built the apparatus bays, just as the apparatus
Right.
bays, a block of building, and then everything else, it's separate block. And we can certainly look at that, but we can guarantee it'll add square footage.
Right.
So, because you're not getting those spatial efficiencies that we're talking about. And when you look at the addition reno, can you bring that up for a second? When you look at the addition reno, that's exactly what you're talking about, right? So we've got, the apparatus bays all there in red and pink would be its own volume. And then the existing building is its own. And what you end up with is a lot more travel distance horizontally to get from point A to point B.
So there's no second floor.
Right,
Right.
there's no second
So you could
floor.
take this, chop off the quarters wing and put it on top of the admin wing.
Over
Well,
here,
but
right.
that's the existing building.
You make it new,
Right, so if,
for the sake of conversation.
for the sake of the conversation, if we,
So you could do the exact opposite, right?
yeah,
Push your apparatus bay down the page and to the right.
mhm,
Take your admin building, turn it 90 degrees and push it all the way to the left.
right.
And put the sleeping quarters on top of the admin.
So then what you also have is the support space. So if we look at this a little bit closer here, we've got the mezzanine and the support space around it, and none of that needs to be 22 feet either. So in the stacked versions of the existing, we're actually putting a lot of that, either the admin space or the dorm space, over those support spaces as well. So, and I don't think, I don't want you to think there's gonna be 12 feet of nothing, because we got lots of mechanical systems that we're trying to keep off the roof. And that makes a good place to hang those pieces of equipment and put all that ductwork. And so, I understand what you're saying about the volume, but what we try to do is maximize every cubic feet of volume within these buildings. So, as we go through the design development of this, that's where we start to get into, where can we put this and where can we put that? And it makes a lot of sense to be hanging a lot of this equipment above the ceilings rather than build mechanical or additional mechanical space.
It doesn't become what's most cost effective. I mean, I agree with you, having space that's unnecessarily high just because it seems like not a good idea, but the same token, if the whole square footage gets bigger and it costs you more, was that a better outcome? I don't know that it would be.
At that point, you're arguing volume, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes putting a pure cost per square foot on a building doesn't make sense if it's got double high bays everywhere, right? So, I mean, the cost per square foot of the high bay area would be different than the cost per square foot of the non-high high bay area, because you're putting twice as much stuff into it.
Correct.
Right, so, I mean, there would be a trade-off there, but I gotta do this a lot more than I do.
But once we start putting this into massing, we can really take a look at it. And as Jason said, these are diagrammatic at this point. And so we have a lot of work to do before we, come to a final design, if you will. So we can certainly share all this information. We have the working group meetings, where we can actually, stop putting this into 3 dimensions and cutting some sections through, and we can really take advantage of the space that's there, or take another look at it, and figure out a way to do it.
So one of my comments on the preferred, what we'll call preferred option is putting the sleeping quarters on top of the bays makes it a very tall building.
Correct. Yep, and what we're gonna try to do, because we have the pitched roofs to work with anyway, is bring that scale down. So we're gonna see if there's a way to bring that scale down in front, because we know that the overhead doors are gonna be 14 feet tall, correct? So we're gonna have 14 feet, and then we can, you know, take a look at what we can do there, and then start the pitched roofs, so that that front that faces the street has more of a, has more of a scale to it. And so the top of the building, this won't be a real pitched roof, right? It's gonna most likely be sort of a mansard, what we kinda call a sloped parapet. You know, from the outside, it's like that, and then, it'll drop down vertically onto the flat roof.
Because what's the height after which we need a special permit?
We need to stay within 40 feet.
Work it out for
So, Aaron, just, we agree with you, with your approach to this. I think we knew this coming in too, is because we're so limited with our area on the site, we have to make the building more compact. And a lot of that has to do with the existing building and trying to work around that, so we avoid some of those phasing and temporary housing costs. So that's what's led to these options that you're seeing, because obviously we're avoiding the existing building. One potential solution is to, if you look at this, if the apparatus bays were slid forward more, you could potentially do something in 2 phases and get that closer to the street. But now you've got to somehow address what's happening with the existing building during construction. So we're trying to do basically 2 phases, right? Build a building, occupy it, take the old building down. So, which is the most cost-effective way to do it, so. Yeah, it's a lot of building and a little bit of space.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think one of the advantages of the north-south orientation is that it gets more, or less of the apparatus bay viewed right from the street. And so maybe there's some way to reorganize this, that some of that green space and non-apparatus bay spaces kind of pull a little more forward. Is that accurate?
It's an accurate statement. I'm not sure it's really what I meant. And I'll qualify that by saying and if you're considering this a public building and you want it to be accessible and approachable, you want to walk up to a front door. You don't want to walk up to garage bays. Right? So where the interesting thing about the north-south scenario is the face that faces the street is what I'll call a residential facade, right? So it doesn't have the commercial features of the garage bays. I mean, again, I don't know that it's worth getting hung up on that because it's not a house, it's a fire station. I get that. I know I'm somewhat being idealistic here. It's more, I'll say it this way, Kevin. My concern with this approach is the asphalt front yard. Right? That's really what the concern is. This lends itself for an asphalt front yard.
And
That's-
in front of the apparatus base, absolutely. What we certainly haven't done here is looked at any of the landscape planning that's gonna happen in at least in our minds, where the main entrance is. We can almost create a pocket park in front of that, and you can pull some of the parking down the side. So you help to minimize, well, the asphalt's gonna be there in front of the apparatus, you know,
Yeah.
that's what's gonna happen. But if we can do something in between that and the entrance, the public entrance to the building, I actually think it could be quite nice. A pocket park, a memorial, something like that, out in front of the building.
The weird thing about this is that I think we believe that this will actually have less asphalt as a solution than the north-south, because we don't have to worry about the turning radius, we're just coming straight out. So,
It might have less asphalt, but you won't see it because you'll see the short end of the parking lot instead of the long end.
And you need at least your apron to be large enough for your biggest vehicle to make a, like, U-turn basically to be able to back in, because you don't want to be, well, a lot of the firehouses that we have, you're blocking the street, or at least 2 lanes of the street to back in.
We do that now.
Yeah, so I think it's important to be able to have whatever the worst turning radius vehicle, to be able to make like a full U-turn within that size of the apron.
And having it set back roughly, just under 100 feet from the curb line or sidewalk allows you to do that. But I think everything that's being said here tonight is a great discussion, because the building's only gonna get better, based on all of this. And, there's just the idea of, from the chief's perspective, from the staff's perspective, and from your perspective, which one do we think has more promise as we kind of get towards the 15th? Because we do want to start taking a look at what does this building look like? And how do we offset the garage doors in either concept and the asphalt in either concept with the landscaping that's required, and to make it a welcoming entrance? Because I do know that in the, in the business district, we also have to have so much glass on that front that does welcome people in. So everything you see there in green, although it's right now tucked behind the existing building, that will be sort of your entranceway, or your welcoming entranceway.
That's an interesting point. Are we still resigned to the fact that we're going for a special permit?
So as it stands right now, and as you see on the site right now, we have that the green is the setbacks. And we believe that everything complies, so we don't need a special permit. However, the parking could become a question mark in terms of whether or not we need a special permit. And so will the church property, so. Yep.
You've made an assumption on the church here.
Well, right, but Rich has reviewed this drawing. And so what Rich told us was that the church was not considered in the residential zone. And so that being the case, we took away that setback. So if you remember, the first time we met, we had that setback along the church property. And when we met with Rich and we went through everything, he said,
But it is a residential zone.
on the map, it's a residential zone, but on the deeds, the fire station's a residential zone. So I just think there's some work there that needs to be looked at, the next time we go to the planning board. We talked about that today, actually. We have a couple of questions for the planning board. The first is to confirm that the church is not residential or zoned as residential. To confirm that the fire station is not residential, because it's not shown that way on the map, but it is shown that way,
But that's gonna require changing the zoning.
on the property deeds, right? And so, but, to your point about a
It's gonna
special.
be easier. Special permit.
So,
Okay, well, I'll finish my thought.
yeah,
Special permit would allow you to reconsider the glass. I mean, the glass is really for commercial space, it's not for fire station. So
Okay.
if we do go down that road, I think that's another
yeah,
ask for forgiveness we could request.
okay.
We did think that on this option, we would need a special permit to get public parking in, because it would all be within that setback.
Right, so, so we are planning to go back to the planning board in January. We haven't set a date yet, but that's the target. And to sort of work out a bunch of things, such as, the pitched roofs, we've been talking about cost, and the next thing we'll talk about, on our agenda is the cost. But the pitched roofs, the amount of glass, what we're doing in terms of the building, that all has obviously cost implications. And so, with that, we also want to talk about the parking, because you talk about asphalt. We believe, looking at the zoning, we'd probably need somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 parking spaces. But you also have in the zoning, the opportunity to share parking, right? And in fact, it's encouraged in the business district to share parking, and you have the large church parking lot immediately next door. So one thought is, how can we maximize the landscaping, frankly, and reduce the amount of parking if we have sort of a number for visitors, if you will? And then if we do have a meeting, a large meeting in the training room, community meeting in the training room, or something else going on at the station where lots of people have to park, we obviously have the church parking lot right next door. So that would require a special permit, is to get a reduction of the parking requirement. And we also want them to agree with us that usable space, would be only space that the public would have access to, right? because I think the way the zoning regs say, it's usable space. Well, if you take usable space of 25,000 square feet, that's a lot of cars. And so what we want to get the planning board to agree with is it's basically the training room / community room, and it's the, only the business spaces that the community has access to. And then divide that by 300 square feet per space.
Don't you need to consider the parking, though, that the employees,
Yes. Yep.
part of that? Okay.
Right, so we want to be able to say, you know, we have X number of employees, we'll have X number of visitors. This is the parking, you know, that we think works best for the station, and just doesn't happen to fall into that formula in the zoning.
I have a couple comments, if everyone doesn't mind. I worked on a department previously that had the pull-through bays, and I overall wasn't a fan of them. They did use them, but it increased the snow removal costs and time involved, and also like having two open doors to pull the apparatus through would ruin our energy efficiency. And it takes away a lot of storage space. It ends up being a lot of ancillary storage space behind the vehicles because you just run out of space very quickly. Especially where we're trying to get the smallest square footage possible, I think that the storage space might end up becoming an issue down the road. So I just think, from my perspective, I've never been a fan of the pull-throughs. It's just me, but, I like this layout better. I like the triage area, having access to the bays, and it basically being an isolated training room, and lobby. But I would like to see like a watch desk or a war room or something in there. Like if there is if there is like a bingo night or something in the training room, the staff is gonna want someone down there the whole time to facilitate. You know, do you have an extension cord? We need a cup of water or whatever. I think it would be a good opportunity to give them a space to reside, so they don't just have to kind of sit in the lobby awkwardly. So even if it's not occupied all the time, our stations have a watch desk that's occupied 24 hours a day, and that person is there to greet, like, any directions to this location, can I park here? I missed my train, or whatever the case is. So I think it is a good opportunity to provide that space, even with the intercom. Like, the fire station isn't as isolated as a police station typically is. And I think if we have, you know, if we're only at just under 26,000 square feet, I think it's worth adding an extra 100 or 200 to give that space. Also, I agree that I think this is very like foreboding. It's a huge commercial garage. The entrance, the public entrance is way far back on the property. Like, the vehicles that are smaller, are they ambulances or are they like SUVs?
It's both. It'll be ambulances and our, what we call our squads, or brush trucks, and then like that.
'Cause I kind of wonder if we have the 3 or 4 main vehicle bays, then have the public area, and then similar to the other orientation in this. So what I'm saying here is if we move the green towards where the short bays are, and then orient the short bays to come out 90 degrees to the right, to basically use the existing parking lot, that may allow us to set the public space forward a little bit more, and then still be within our scope to have the vehicles, not have 8 bays worth of garages directly facing the street, and then not give us a weird orientation of like triangular spaces to use. I don't know if that's been looked at, or.
It hasn't. One of the reasons, and it's a good thought, I like the idea, is by separating the apparatus bays, you run into a decontamination issue of keeping clean zone and dirty zone. So you would almost have to have 2 separate decontamination zones, one for each set of apparatus bays. So you're gonna be doubling the functions there. Otherwise, potentially you're going through in your dirty gear through that public space to get to the decontamination on the other side.
But you could set that public space in front of the right orientation bays and put the decon zone in between the 2 sets. You still would only need 1 decon zone that would be shared by the 2 sets of bays. And it's not gonna be, especially if it's ambulances and brush trucks, those, neither one of those require formal decon on a regular basis. Because the cancer policies don't apply to brush fire stuff.
Right.
And the ambulances, although they're used at fires, I'm gonna assume, I'm making an assumption with the staffing here, that if a fire call comes in, those staff will rotate to an engine.
I think the decon piece that we were looking at, it actually will be, we wanted to make sure,
Yeah, we put this with Franklin, that the decon space, for if you had a gross decon from a patient, or from a, for instance, we transported a COVID patient that had to do advanced interventions, we wanted access to it from the outside, and the way it is now, the ambulances could drive right up to the decon area and strip. which is kind of what we wanted. So I think that could be feasible, where the ambulance is still, because of the exterior entrance, if we had that issue, you could gross decon that, with their orientation being flipped and kind of moving, in other words, moving the boxes around. You're still in a similar footprint, but just moving that around to accommodate what you're saying is bringing some of the public stuff more towards the street.
I also, if we go look at the second floor of this, if we don't mind, from working in firehouses, I like that there's a complete, like, clear and distinct separation between admin and firefighter occupied spaces. I'd even like to see like a doorway between where the red and that corridor that leads into the yellow is. Like, in that, if you go down a little bit, nope, not
You're about
right
here.
there, yep, to give a clear and distinct space, because the firefighters, no offense to the chief, but they don't want to be interacting with the admin folks on a regular basis. And I don't know if this is the time to talk about like minor, like I want a door here or whatever, but those are just some of my,
You know, it's a great point. This one, we put the door up here so that you could get into the side of this room.
Mhm.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, keeping that separation is important. We certainly could look at putting a door here,
Yeah, I think there's doors on either end of that corridor.
right here and here, yeah.
To kind of isolate this.
I think to give full flow through, because like the company officer would have to come around, enter the admin space to re-enter like the residential space for the
Right.
kitchen. Or, I feel like just to give full flow to the
Sure.
firefighter occupied space. And like I said, I don't know that it's time for this or not, but in the top of the firefighter space, the orange, is the officer's room. And then right next to it is a bunk room to the left. From my experience working in offices that the admin office shares the bed of the bunk room, it's less than ideal. And I know it's nitpicky, but I would almost like to see that bunk room be attached to the office to give, because there's a lot of folks who might come in for paperwork, or they want to check their vacations, or if there's overtime to be filled, it may not want to interrupt the officer that may be in that private space. And where the other firefighters have space to spread out in the rooms, there is only one officer room. So the incoming officer changing out with the outgoing officer gives them a space to get changed privately and get their affairs in order before they leave, without having to be interrupted for all the administrative stuff day to day. Again, I don't know if this is the time for that, but that's just what I've seen. It's the first time I've had an opportunity to talk about it. And is there a laundry space, like, for station wear and bedding and whatnot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right there.
And then on the first floor, sorry to keep jumping around.
No, it's fine.
Is it possible to orient the elevator towards the staircase so that there's no temptation from the public when they come in, that they won't even think that they have access to the upper areas? Or is that too much of a hassle with the way the stairs are oriented and getting furnishings in and out?
We can certainly look at moving things around. Yeah, we could swap the elevator machine room. We can look at it. This was an attempt to get rid of as much circulation as possible, to keep this compact, but that's a possibility.
Can you do a machine roomless elevator with the hydraulics?
Not in Massachusetts.
Okay.
You, by code, have to have a machine room in Massachusetts.
Well, I mean, I can think of a whole bunch of buildings that don't have them, so do they get a permit or exemption, or how does that work?
I don't know, the elevator code, current elevator code in Massachusetts says that you have to have an elevator machine room, even if you do a machineless room type elevator.
But that could just be a computer, like at the watch desk.
It has to be in a separate room, our understanding from the code.
I mean, I can
Like
think
the
of,
elevator machine, the elevator code changes almost,
yeah.
seemingly every year.
I mean, I can think of probably 10 addresses right now in the city that have machine roomless elevators.
Probably previous.
But I don't know if if that works with hydraulics or if it's only the cable elevators.
I think it's just cable.
Right, so the belted elevators, they have a rather large panel. And it used to be that you could put the panel in the shaft. And then it was, you had to put the panel like on a wall next to the shaft. And now it's, you have to put the panel in a room. And so, I think, so I think what's, sometimes when the machine roomless elevators came out, I don't think everybody had a grasp on like what that meant. And then as time goes on, I just think that, some of the inspectors have reverted back to, just give us a room. We don't want to go in the shaft, we don't want to go here, we don't want to go there, just give us a room. So with the way it stands right now, which is weird, you have to have a machine room for the electrical panel of the.
Well, in this building, where's the sprinkler room?
We often do it right off the apparatus base, 'cause it's also a training opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah, and water's coming off the street.
And then, I'm trying, what else I guess that's it, I've taken up enough time.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
I think your idea of shifting the green space to the left and rotating those smaller cars, if that works, I think that's a good idea.
And I think that can even work while they're with the previous structure there, because
Well,
they can
yeah,
still
'cause you've got,
respond around it.
right, you've got some space that you could pull it forward, kind of, might get a little tight.
These two you're talking about, yeah.
If those got like, I think what you're saying is taking that rectangle, rotating it 90 degrees,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
moving the green up.
And even then, you might, even if you have to make it 3 or 4 wide, because it won't be double, I think that's okay. Because again, it won't be seen from the street, and I would theorize that they could probably even be shorter doors, especially if they're shorter bays that you can't park a full apparatus in. Maybe you can get away with like 10 or 12 feet there instead of 14.
Yeah, I don't know yet.
I mean, to your point, I think it's agreeing on one of these three, and then we can move the blocks around from here, right?
Yeah, I think what we want to do is, so there's another aspect to this, and this is oriented east-west, where the other one is north-south. So in terms of harvesting daylight and things like that, so the whole front of this building basically faces north, whereas, the other side, the other option, you have the small end of the building facing north, and then the other end facing east, but that means the other side's facing west, so you have a lot of western exposure there. So, the goal really is to just say, which one are we more in favor of right now? And then we're gonna be able to develop that, right? We've got some time. This is the feasibility stage. What we're trying to do is find out which orientation may work best on the site. And then in terms of, and even as you said, right, move around the blocks that are in there, start taking a look at this thing three-dimensionally. There's a lot of development that needs to take place. So, that's, if you're comfortable, and if you're not comfortable, then tonight's not the night to decide. But if you're at least comfortable in saying, we prefer this over that, then that would be a move forward. Because we do have to develop the addition and renovation, just, again, so we can get a number on that, and so that we can get it estimated, because the reality is, we only got 15 days left, right? To come back with the draft report, so the cost estimator is working on all of these right now. And he's working on the addition and renovation, and he's waiting for us to tell him, which one to go with.
So the reports, we're not picking one of three, we're really picking one of two tonight, because the addition renovation is going to be
Yeah,
on
I mean,
the table.
you may decide that the addition renovation's not worth discussing because of all the challenges that we've talked about in terms of phasing, temporary conditions, bringing it up to category 4. But I think, to the point that was made at our last meeting, we do want to grab, be able to tell people in the community, yes, we did seriously look at it, and yes, we did figure it out, and we came up with a plan, and this is
Yeah,
what
and
that plan's gonna
I
cost.
think if that's not selected, we just need a list of like, here's why it's
Mhm.
not selected, because someone who's just picking this up for the first time is gonna say, oh, well, cost per square foot, that's the smallest square footage, isn't that gonna be cheapest?
And I think there are nuances, and I think, one of the things that you brought up, there was one of the plans that we did discuss did have, kind of the admin space as a separator, or kind of in the middle, and kind of out in front, if you will. And again, one of the things that me trying to do my job and be conscious of the size and the footprint of the building, I kind of squashed that one pretty quick, just because I like the look of it and the aesthetic of it, but that didn't meet, or that, in other words, we still were able to accomplish the program and have a smaller footprint and be conscious of the overall size and square footage. That's been a big focus of mine, and in my conversations with staff, is that we don't want to sacrifice program, but if there's areas we can sacrifice that don't end up impacting what we're able to do as far as putting a product out on the street and housing what we need to house, then I want it to be as tight as possible. So there are some of those things that have been brought up that we kind of did look at, my thought was, and I may have been wrong, but my thought was, hey, let's focus on the tightest, most efficient layout and floor plan and envelope we can get that still keeps us functional and leaves us room for growth. You know, because there are some things aesthetically that I was like, you know, from the tours we did, I'm like, I really like the way this looks. You know, but I'm like, do we move the mezzanine and put it in between the bays of the separator and kind of have a public entrance way there? You know, could we? Yeah, but it really changed the flow and the functionality of the building and made the envelope there. Which, you know, I think those are things, I just wanted to make sure you all are aware that, you know, some of those things have been brought up and we discussed in some of the fire station tours, and even just, you know, from my nostalgic memories of a little boy visiting fire stations, the apparatus bay was the front and center focal point. You know, it is. And, you know, the shiny apparatus behind those doors is what people are drawn to. They're not drawn to the entryway. Like, I could care less about the entrance, even as an adult. Like, I am drawn to the gate. And that may be different because, you know, most firefighters have a little bit of a sickness in their brain. You know,
Is that what it is?
We like to run into places people are running out, and we're drawn to big shiny things and make a lot of noise. So, but with that being said, I think the part of this and where we get the most public interaction, believe it or not, is actually the apparatus bays. It's not the entrance. Even when people come to do business, they come to the apparatus bay. And I think one of my lieutenants here, he can attest to that. People come to the apparatus bay. And that, you know, I just wanted to bring that point to the table because I recognize what you're saying, and it is something we thought about. But then when we really thought about it critically and how we interact and receive the public currently, you know, which could be a limitation of the building itself. But with that being said, the most public interaction we have is through the apparatus bay. And I think people are, you know, for whatever reason, are drawn to that when you're looking at a fire station as something you want to be, you know.
That's an interesting point, Chief.
If I could jump in, I would be preferring the east-west version. You know, I've just, after learning everything we've learned about the existing building, I just don't think it's fair to the community to revisit trying to fix up something into what it never was intended to be, and it's gonna cost a lot to do, take extra time to do it. Just don't think it's a good use of money, because we're gonna be asking for a lot, whatever we do here, and I couldn't stomach doing that. I think I agree with the chief. I like this because it's I think the program is met, and it's the most efficient use of space, which is huge. I think your point about the height and volume, all that, you know, we need to continue to think about. I really like Justin's idea about moving the green over and the short bays out, because in one sense, that gets your triage area closer to where the ambulance is. Isn't that part of the goal? I do agree with the chief that, you know, people are drawn to, you know, the big cool trucks, and, you know, you park them out front. You know, maybe we can pull the whole building a little closer to the front. We talked this afternoon about painting the line on the pavement out there right now, so we could see where we really would end up. If that's possible, make it a little shorter, to bring it a little closer. I think that would be nice, because it feels a little weird to have it far back. But to the, you know, I also think a public entrance that people can identify makes sense, and having it kind of hung on the side, you know, maybe that can be shifted around a little bit and still fit everything that's supposed to go where it's supposed to go. I'm kind of wondering if it will mean that the building has to get a little bit bigger, because maybe those short bays can be a little shorter and go over the other way. I don't know, but, you know, I think it's worth exploring. I didn't care for the north-south from the very beginning, and it's bigger, so it costs more, so I don't like that. I have to worry about, you know, at the end of the day, we're gonna have to finance this, and that keeps me up at night, so.
Is it a requirement of the code that the elevator be in the public accessible hallway or lobby, or just that an elevator exists?
It has to be within an accessible route.
So what I'm thinking is, obviously it's basically to keep the height at 22 feet and to, like, not have a lot of excess space. It basically would need to be 2.5 or 3 levels. But if the elevator were to move over in like the vicinity of the training stair, with a mezzanine running along the back of the apparatus bay to allow access to like effectively the second floor on the right-hand side,
Right.
and then the third floor or second and a half floor above that from the same elevator, is that within the code? or
I don't
potentially-
think so. I think you're potentially forcing somebody to, go through what is an operational space to get to that. We can look into it, and see how we would interpret it.
That's the access up to the administration, so if someone comes in who's physically challenged, you can't expect them to go someplace else other than that lobby to get to the site.
And then, so keep maybe moving the elevator closer to the apparatus base and letting you get to the administration on the second, and then whatever spaces could potentially be in that space, if that was a thing, would that work?
Possibly. We could look at pulling the stair down a little bit, moving the elevator over. We will definitely take a look at rotating these, so you're coming off the side, and then potentially that would push all of this up here. So that would put the elevator a little bit more central. So all of that's a possibility that we'll look at. The big limiting factor here is this, and how far we can go. And we'll see how far we can push up the public areas. Right now, we're probably even closer than we should be. You really want a good 20 feet, because once you start digging out at foundations, you're getting even closer to be able for the contractor to work. So I think we're only 15 right now. So we just need to keep that in mind. We'll get as close as we can, to that corner and see what we can do, but we'll look at all of that.
So just if,
Point two, I don't mean to cover, but point two, your house watch. So we've had a lot of discussion about that, and in talking to some of the area chiefs where we toured, Sharon in particular and Walpole, both felt like it was a total and complete waste of money for the way our towns have to operate, because nobody's ever in it. So it ends up being however many square feet and however much investment in infrastructure for whatever being, in essence, wasted. So originally I had house watching the plan, I did, and one of the first plans had it, and I was, the kind of traditional part of me was like, no, we have to have a house watch. And after looking at that and talking to those chiefs, they were like, listen, there's no reason for us to have it, it's literally wasted space. Because I hear what you're saying, it's like that, it's that piece where, hey, somebody should be here. So really, the way we operate, we're only at 4 people a shift, we don't have the luxury of having anybody available to sit in that space ever. So, it isn't a space that we need, or that we need to account for, to be honest. And that's just the way we operate. And I can't say that, I can't say definitively we'll never operate in a way where we could afford to have a house watch person, but I just don't see it being in the foreseeable future. I mean, that would put us, at a time frame when we were at maybe 7, 8 people per shift, or having 2 full functioning companies where one is not really as busy as the other. Where right now, everything's going out the door every time we get a call, so there's no house watch. And even if we get to 5, 6 people, we're still gonna be in the same mode of everything's going out the door every time we get a call. So I think we're a long way from being in a position where we benefit from having a house watch, just to, but I had it in the plan, and I had it, I had made a point to tell them, hey, this needs to be right near the bay, but also close to the entrance, and all of those things that the house watch usually embodies. And it was something that we discussed, and I just said, we're giving this up to allow for other spaces and to allow us to continue to tighten this up.
Chief, on that note, you should probably keep the list of the stuff you took out.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because at some point, somebody's gonna say, well, why can't we take 2,000 more square feet out of this? It would be great to pull out a list and say, well, look, we already took 5,000 square feet out of it, here's everything we took out.
Yeah, we have the program, and
Yeah.
it'll
All the
reflect all of
iterations
that.
of where we started, which was
we should
over
keep that.
30,000. It would really help these, I think it would really help a public conversation where people
Yes.
are asking, 26,000, that's huge. You know, if you go through the history.
So just to that point, I just wanted to share. Where would we go? So this green area right here of that space, this back area here, and all of this pink, that's actually only one story with sloped roofs over it, a flat roof over it here, and then we do have this overhang for the piece. So what we're suggesting is, if you're okay with this scheme, we can come up with a couple different iterations of this as we continue forward, so that we can explore some of those concepts of how do you bring the scale down, which I think we've been thinking about, but just obviously it's not coming through in what we're doing. But how do you bring that scale down, and how is the building best organized? Because the next thing we want to talk about after you make a decision about the plans is the budget. And you'll see why I think the chief is talking about our drive for at least the last 6 weeks has been all about function and money. Because we're architects, we're gonna make it beautiful. When this thing is done, as Blight said, people are gonna look at this from the street and go, wow, it's beautiful. But right now, it's all about the function, the layout, and the size, right, the square footage, because that's affecting the budget.
I know, me personally, even before we kind of discussed this more in depth tonight, and the square footage reduction of the east-west orientation, I preferred the east-west orientation to the north-south. It seemed cleaner to me, just making it a little bit more linear. That might be kind of the engineering side speaking, but it just seemed a little bit more compact and cleaner. And then I don't know if this will really be usable or not, but it did just seem to leave a little bit more space on the site during construction that might help phasing or help construction staging and help make the construction cost a little more efficient as well. So, my 2 cents, I prefer this orientation. And also, even before you started speaking about it, Chief, it just seemed like a much more direct path to Main Street for your operations. That it seemed like, while there's some pros, I think, to the north-south orientation, I just felt this look just seemed a little cleaner to me. I don't know if anybody else has anything.
Maybe a straw poll would be helpful to
Sure.
give them some direction.
Maybe, they could have direction to move it and sort of work on the comments that you, as a committee, have offered.
I mean, does anybody have anything else they want to comment on the two?
Well, I mean, I guess I guess I've got a couple closing comments, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of support for this option. I don't think it's necessarily bad. Wasn't my favorite coming in, but I think there are some inefficiencies to the north-south option. And I think I would rather have you guys spend your time on this option and try and make it sing rather than distracting yourselves amongst multiple options. That being said, I do think, as Kevin is saying, that this option looks good in 2 dimensions. What I can't wrap my head around is what it looks like in 3 dimensions, and I think you guys have your work cut out.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Coming from the architect.
We got it.
I mean, this was my preferred option coming into it. I wouldn't be ready to say like, yeah, let's go with this one. I think there is a lot that can be rearranged and organized. But I think that it's definitely a much better structure than the north-south is. I think the north-south might look good architecturally, but I don't know that it's really functional. And especially with a lot of movement of the apparatus, I just feel like there'd be a lot of challenges for the personnel with that. But I also wouldn't be ready to commit to this drawing as it stands tonight.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's what we're doing.
No, I just,
Yeah.
in general, yeah, I'm like, not like, be like, yeah, let's go get it, this one. But definitely do think that this one is better than the north-south.
If I'm
I'm not mistaken, I think from the work that we've done and the things that I've seen, the architects do, I think if we get a firm understanding of the orientation, the footprint that's there, I think we can move just about anything, if I'm not mistaken. It can be oriented or shifted however we, you know, however, to address some of the concerns you brought, because quite honestly, some of the concerns you brought up, you know, we had kind of mentioned, but they weren't on the forefront. And what I think the good thing about this committee is having citizens of the town and kind of things that you would like to see, if this being kind of the town center crown jewel, if you will. Like, hey, what's gonna make this be the thing that we're proud of and, you know, attach our names to and be happy about as a community and as members of the town and of this committee. So I think that's awesome. But I think, you know, the good thing is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we can kind of move these boxes and adjust,
Absolutely.
you know, to fit, which is good.
Yeah, it's our job now to take all of this great suggestions and play with it and make it as efficient and tight as possible, and then we'll bring it back.
I have one more thought, which doesn't necessarily go to the options, but I think it would be short-sighted to compromise the new fire station because of the existing fire station. If the right thing to do is to get rid of that fire station, the existing fire station, and build the new one right where it is, then let's convince ourselves that investing $200,000-$400,000 in a temporary scenario for a year is good in the long run, because it gets us a better 50, 60-year building. And when we're talking the prices that we're talking, you know, $200,000, $300,000 is a small percentage of the overall cost. So I guess I just, as you guys are looking at this and you're like, you know what, it would really sing if we could lop off the back half of that building. Maybe it's something we need to consider.
Well, I don't know, I mean, maybe you might be able to do some level of partial demolition. I think we're getting a little sidetracked from what we absolutely need to discuss tonight, but I think to your point, yeah, I mean, maybe there is some partial demolition or something that could be done where the building's still occupiable. I don't know. I think we have to at least discuss it.
Yeah, and that has been discussed at the meetings, so
it's just
that's why
funny.
Blythe is laughing.
Oh, okay.
Because we've had those discussions of, can we just keep the apparatus bay, knock down the whole rest of it, and now you're just keeping that apparatus bay functional. But it's giving you a lot more elbow room to do a lot of the things actually that you were mentioning tonight.
Changes, the thing that,
Yeah.
for me, I'll say, you know, quite candidly, the thing for me is, at the end of the day, we want this project to pass. That's my goal at the end of the day. So, again, like I've advised my staff and like in our communication, I said, you know, we don't want to sacrifice capability or programming, but, you know, whatever we can tighten up and sacrifice that keeps costs down, then let's do it. I would love to feel comfortable to say, you know what, lock it down, let's do exactly everything, to do exactly what we want that fits the need. You know, I've kind of let go of some of what we want, but I did not let go of anything that we need in terms of programming. None of us, in talking to the staff, we didn't let go of needs, but we did let go of wants. You know, there's some aesthetic things that we like, the look of this station or that station and the kind of quaint New England town look and feel. Like, we're probably gonna have to give up on some of that, but we also know, and we're gonna rely on the architects to give us some of that too. But again, like, a big driving force in all of this, and I think we'll get some insight into it, has been, man, that first meeting when we talked about the program and the initial sticker shock, it was scary. So it became the mission and the point, you know, for me and for this group and my staff. We were like, okay, what can we do to really tighten this thing up, but also not lose room for growth and lose any program. And I think that's how we arrived at kind of this footprint. You know, but the exact thing you just said is something that was brought up. It was exactly what you just said. Lop off this half of the building, and then we got the exact thing. And we kind of were all like, that would be great, but now we got, potential phasing and costs, and that's what rings in my head,
So, maybe this is what you're about to say. Maybe we could, I'd like to take a vote then to try and move this forward. As far as the north-south versus east-west orientation. I feel ready to vote on it. So, I guess by a show of hands, all those who agree to moving forward with the east-west orientation? Okay. All set.
Okay, now put your seatbelts on. So,
Well, this is less square footage, right?
it is, it is.
No, I know.
Take one, pass it down.
So,
Printed them so you can try
Oh,
not to read those.
thank you.
itsy bitsy
It's a
numbers.
tiny number.
so,
No, not tiny numbers, it's just tiny on the page.
That's what I mean, tiny print.
So I don't know if you want to work backwards or frontwards. If we take a look at this, you'll see that what we tried to do was itemize this as best we can. And we've used some spreadsheets that we've used in the past where you're gonna see some things identified as zero. And the reason they're zero is because they're items that typically take place on a project like this, but we don't believe we need it on your project. And then you're gonna see a lot of things that have numbers assigned to them, that are in red. And the ones that are in red, like the zeros at the top of the page, that talk about band interest and band paid and insurance fees, those are things that we believe might be required. And so, for instance, if we do take out a band, which is a bond anticipation note, are there costs associated with that? Are there interest costs associated with that? And so that would become part of the project, obviously. So as we move down in that first site acquisition and ownership fees, you see the line items there, and these are budgeted line items. So this is our cost estimator and our team getting together and saying, here's what we think this is going to cost. Bless you. You'll see something on there like planning board fees, $10,000. Well, if the planning board doesn't charge that, you don't spend it. And so, as we move forward, this document becomes a living document, because we're gonna start putting in actual numbers as they're either spent or not spent, and it goes to zero. So then as you move down, you're gonna see some site data costs, and again, those are budgeted numbers. And you'll see some things on there like geo-environmental investigations and geothermal, or I should say hazmat. And so some of those things have already been identified, and we're carrying budget numbers. And then you've got the A&E fees, and those are all broken down into sort of basic services in terms of what's included. And as we move further down, we start to get into independent consultants. And again, you're gonna see some things there, like for instance, when we talk about HVAC systems, you may wanna talk about geothermal. And obviously, those are just budgeted line items right now as zero, because right now they're not in the project. As long as lead registration and things like that, but these are things that you can consider as we continue moving along with the project. You will note that in that zone, we do have a commissioning agent. The commissioning agent is, we're thinking, not only mechanical and electrical commissioning, but also envelope commissioning. And so, as we move further down, you'll see the furniture and equipment, and you'll see a lot of red notes there. And the reason for the red notes is, we're building a building, and we're gonna equip that building, so, and we're gonna furnish it. How much of the existing furniture and equipment can be reused? How much can we dive into that number? So for instance, right at the top, you see furniture and equipment, $300,000. That's based on our most recent project. It doesn't mean you're gonna buy all the same furniture that fire department did, right? So we're holding that as a budget number, as a responsible number, and that number is gonna go up and down depending on what you all decide to buy for furniture and equipment. So the reason I'm saying that is because when we're working our way down the sheet here and you see these numbers, we wanna be responsible. We wanna make sure that at the end of the day, it costs less than what you're seeing here, right? And for that reason, the next phase that you see is a total amount for the soft costs, and then you see a soft cost contingency. So that means that even though Vertex has worked very close with us, our cost estimators worked very close with us, and we've provided as much information as we can from our historical records, we're still carrying a 5% contingency just to protect those budget numbers. That contingency is your money. So, you know, don't look at that as it's absolutely gonna be spent in the job. You need to look at that as that's protecting the budget right now. So all of those things above that line item, you have control over, right? How much do you spend on furniture, how much you spend on equipment, and what kind of equipment goes into the building. A lot of that equipment also, by the way, is sort of operational equipment, you know, that could be bought from separate budgets or could be bought, you know, we are still trying to hunt down some grants. I know the infrastructure and Blight's saying nope because we've been unsuccessful with those grants. The next thing you're gonna see is construction costs. So on the right-hand side of the construction costs, we have that red number that says 25,720. That number started at the beginning of this project at 30,900. So you can see that the work has really been focused on how do we get all of the parts and pieces that the chief needs within this building and reducing it by 5,000 square feet. And so the next thing that you see there is actually a phasing contingency. So this gets to Aaron's point about, you know, we've got $100,000 in there right now because we do know that there's going to be some type of phasing. Now, whether that phasing is just, you know, knocking down the building in its entirety after the existing is built and finishing the site work, or if it's part of knocking down part of that building, right? That number can go up and down depending on what we decide to do with that existing building. The next thing you see there is a demolition budget. Again, we're carrying $100,000 outside of the construction budget for demolition. As we decide what we're gonna do with either a phased demolition or a demo all at once, that number will go up and down. Then what you see is two more contingencies. The first contingency is a construction contingency. So if we build this new building, we're gonna carry a 5% contingency, which is standard throughout the industry. But the next highlighted number you see there is a 6% contingency that we're carrying just to protect the bid budget because we're bidding this next year. And as you all know, the market is all over the place right now. So we want to be responsible in this number and say that we've got these contingencies. Well, if we bid this next year and that contingency is not needed, that's 900 and some odd $1,000 that comes off the top, right? So I think it's very insightful for the town to have decided to, let's get the drawings completed to the point where we can get a 100% CD estimate or even a bid in hand when we go to the vote, because some of these contingencies are gonna shrink, right? They're gonna go up or down based on what we actually get for bid numbers. The next contingency there you see is an owner's contingency of 5%. And that's because in the point we're at right now in a design, we want to give you the flexibility of saying, do we want to add a little bit more? Do we want to take a little bit out? And that contingency is covering that. It's also covering anything during construction, right? Because you start building a building and sometimes an owner will want to make some changes during that process. So that again is in your complete control. So these budget numbers are trying to be as responsible as possible. And then down at the bottom, you'll see that we're at 23 million total project cost. The new money that we would need to get on this is essentially 20 million. And again, this is, you know, a budget that's gonna get more refined as we start working with the cost estimator and we start getting schematic design estimates, design development estimates, and CD estimates throughout 2022.
At this point, we're not even quite sure how long the duration of the project's gonna be. So
some things are contingent upon whether it's a 12-month, 14-month, 16-month project. So, and like Ron says, we got, some of these are budget numbers, some are placeholder numbers, but trying to be as I guess, conservative with our number as possible, that, in the hopes that things obviously go down.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to add things like there'll be a small legal budget. We will, if we don't have a vote for a debt exclusion on the same day we already have an election, there's a cost, a small cost to that. There's very little cost in a ban to borrow money, but, to go through a full, 30-year bond process and sell that, we can try and time it with something else. But there will be some cost there. I'm glad you included the builder's risk. Maya started a whole program, you probably know this, for builder's risk, so you don't have to go out and procure it on your own. So I think that would be helpful, but some things that, I do not like adding, but some things to fill in some zeros we'll have to just work on.
Where does the 23.5 put us in line with other ongoing projects in the state?
The 23.5,
Overall.
the overall building project, so, I believe that comes to, what, per square foot? $900 a square foot, so actually, that's a great point, because one of the things we discussed today was this number of $625 per square foot. When we were actually, we received your RFP, and we, were sort of excited about competing for this job. That number was $550 in our minds. And what's taken place just since we've started the process of putting our proposal together, that number's gone from $550 to $625 because of the way the market is all over the place right now.
That's almost $2 million in less than a year.
Yeah,
Right.
we have projects that have just recently been opened, so it's, we do have actual backup. A community center project for us came in at 617, so, small building, nothing like a fire station. So the 625, at this point, it is a good number for construction, cost per square foot.
And then add to that the 6% escalation cost,
Yep.
which is what we have in the budget,
Yeah,
so.
We're estimating on today's dollars.
Yep. So to answer your question, I think that, we have been checking. We did talk to Walpole about what they paid per square foot, and they were in the $400-something per square foot for construction, and that was completed in 2016.
And that's what we,
It was bid in 2016, so we'll be bidding this in 2022, at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023.
something like that.
Yep, and so they bid theirs in 2016, and it was, north of $400 a square foot.
When we went and did the analysis last year about the police station, and we went and I think Walpole was one of them, the numbers that we got, and so when we said to the town, December 17th last year, hey, this really should have this came in at what it probably was gonna cost, these other stations cost around 400. Our new station's likely, at the square footage, we thought it was gonna be 8 to 10 million. So that may stick in people's mind, and now we're looking at, more than twice, so we'll have to be able to, give them the information that we've gathered about why it's changed and what's different. And there are a number of reasons. It's defensible, it's just not an answer people are gonna like.
Is landscaping included in this?
So right now, we've got the construction costs, we say that the site is included. But that's not a mention of, like, for instance, we've got some open questions, and I don't want to be cagey in this answer, but landscaping means different things to different people, right? You can say landscaping is, we're putting down a nice lawn, and other people think of landscaping as dozens of fruit trees and bushes and everything else. So the other question that we need to talk with the planning board about is the 30-foot buffer against the residential properties. They require a 6-foot, when it's planted, it needs to be 6 foot tall, bush, I guess, or some kind of screening vegetation, every 15 feet, 2 rows, staggered, and so that's a lot if you look at the area on this plan. So again, we have to wait for the cost estimator to come back with those estimates, but what we're looking at right now is to basically work with the planning board and say, we understand this is required under the business district, but what do we really have to do? Now, the nice thing is your neighbor to the east already has a 6-foot fence up. And one way to not put up the vegetation is to put up a 6-foot fence. And so, you know, it's just those types of things that we want to talk to the planning board about.
We save money by putting up a 6-foot fence.
We might, we may. Yep. So, you know, I know you're seeing this for the first time, and we don't expect to have, you know, we didn't expect everybody to cheer. But take your time, absorb it, and then we'd be welcome to comments at next week's meeting. Because we know there's gonna be lots of comments.
And one other point that it's sort of below, below the line here is, you know, a placeholder for temporary, living quarters, which we've got budgeted at $500,000. We had a fairly lengthy conversation about that, at the earlier meeting, the working group meeting. I'd sort of like to continue on that, but are you all set with the budget?
I'm gonna shut up now.
Any questions on the budget? So part of the budget is the living quarters. And like I said, there was a fairly good conversation about it today, and there's a fair amount of coordination that we need to decide what we're going to do, and the first part of it is deciding where we're gonna really orient the building. Because, you know, part of the discussion was in the past is whether we get the new living quarters now, and, you know, because of the issue with the existing. The other part of it is, you know, when we go under construction, we're probably gonna need the new living quarters, because the existing living quarters may be admin offices, you know, if we're not using parts of the existing fire station. That all depends on how our design goes. We also talked a little bit about, you know, originally it was like, well, we'd like a larger, I don't wanna say trailer, you know, modular, building, you know, width-wise, because right now you really got a single one. But we also gotta think about, you know, probably you're potentially going to be, the firefighters are potentially gonna be living there, you know, certainly 14, maybe 15, 16 months during construction, but, you know, potentially earlier than that. And, you know, I don't wanna be necessarily a naysayer, but if for some reason the project doesn't get approved first round, they may be staying there longer until we try and go for it again. So, and the chief said today that, you know, plan is to add a 5th firefighter to the rotation. So if we had just replaced what we had, we'd already be short a guy, you know, for space. So the idea is to, you know, design something for essentially the long term. You know, we don't want to bring something in that has no space right off the bat when you start somebody. And then, you know, if you're going to have firefighters, you have 6 dorm rooms because you have an emergency or have someone come in from another neighboring town. You give them a space to stay. That being said, you know, we looked at a couple of designs. We had one from a company up in New Hampshire that did some work for the Boston Fire Department. They sent me a plan of what they did, just for, you know, ideas. It's actually it's for Station 42 that Doran Whittier did finished just recently. That is available. It's up in their yard now. Not that we can just go and say, hey, we want that one and bring it down. We still have to go through a procurement process. But, you know, got some ballpark numbers based on that is an existing, whether it could be modified to really what the chief would want, or whether we go out and just say, this is what, you know, Matt also has, had been in contact with some modular firms previous to us starting, and had some kind of sketches on potential, living quarters. Procurement-wise, we would have to go out as a modular procurement and request for proposals. It's a little bit different, procurement where you sort of give them the, you know, the qualifications of what you want with some detail, some sketches, but it becomes a design by the modular companies. So it's not a low bid situation, it's a proposal that you still go out and get, you know, request proposals for and advertise. So, and we haven't really developed the full answer yet, but there's timing involved. When do we go out for that? When do we pull the trigger now and go out for an RFP and get this and maybe start initiating that now that we believe we know where the building is going to be laid out? But the modular firms will only construct the modular, actually drive it to the site, put it together, and do some of the final connections. Everything else has to be there. So there's another invitation to bid to prep the site, because we're gonna need to tie it into water, septic or sewer, power, IT, and so forth. So there's a couple steps that are involved. Obviously, you want, we're gonna set this on a concrete pad. We want that pad to be there when we bring it in. So, just sort of letting you know that we're having discussions on that, maybe get some input. I'm not looking for a vote or anything like that. We're certainly in the planning stage. But it's really, when do we wanna do that? You know, do we wanna do that now to upgrade the living quarters for the firefighters now? Do we wanna wait until we're, you know, essentially at town meeting, and if town meeting says, you know, we're going to town meeting potentially with bid in hand for the new fire station, do we wait until that point in time? But, you know, some of it you gotta do in advance because you still want the pad in place. There's a few different scenarios here that.
Well, while I'd like to have better space for the staff, they've certainly put up with a difficult situation for a long time. You know, the very basic question comes down to money. If we only had started with 3.3 million, we're spending what we're spending in feasibility, can we, with the money we have left, before we get to a town meeting vote, afford to go through all the design, I'm just looking at numbers on the page here, and get a trailer and get it all set up and not be in the red? We can't do that. We don't have an appropriation. So, is it if a trailer really costs $500,000 and architect, I mean, I realize some of it's during actual construction administration and all that, but $2 million for architects, $1 million for site acquisition, owner fees. You know, you'd add all that up, you're north of 3.3. So I'm just trying to figure out how you'd.
Well, we talked about it, and you had left already, but right
Okay.
now, we're, you know, we're going up to bidding, and for some reason, it doesn't pass. You know, there's no, the architect's numbers right now are carrying construction administration. So, you know, the feeling is that with the 3.3 that's still available, this could happen. And not get us.
That's my
into
question,
money
is I just
trouble.
don't know financially if it can happen. We've already spent, you know, $150,000 in this phase, so down to $3,150,000. Can we get through all the pre-work we need to do and get the trailer?
No,
But I think the flip side is convincing the public that, you know, do we need to add on 500,000, or can somehow, hopefully, it get absorbed in this? Because you're saying to people, we're gonna spend a whole bunch of money for something we're not gonna keep. They don't understand the difficulties that our staff go through, right? They don't appreciate that at all, and that I don't maybe expect them to. but we have to help them understand why this is an investment that's important.
Right, and there's a certain point where rental is good, but as you go further into a rental period, a purchase is
I get
better.
that.
So, I mean, and that's also something that has to be considered, and, you know, do we have a lot of numbers, you know, prepared for you? I did get some.
I know you don't, I just was trying to think of the bigger picture, is it even affordable to do it now? Or does it have to wait and be part of, here, we're gonna rent or buy a trailer for construction through that period, and we're gonna limp till then because we can't afford it, I didn't know.
Yeah, well, I did get some numbers on that existing, it's sitting in a yard, it's already done, it's not brand new, it's been used. And, you know, if you rent it for a year, rental's good. If you go 2 years, the purchase is better.
Sure,
That's the
sure,
flipping
sure.
point. But that, you know, we could certainly go and go out and for the RFP for the trailer and find out what other numbers we get, because the contact that Matt had, the numbers were lower than what I received recently,
Oh,
and that
okay.
may be just because of passage of time. So, and it doesn't mean that, you know, I hate to put out a proposal to sort of shop for numbers, but it doesn't mean that you have to award anything.
I
If it
understand.
comes back and it's not palatable at all.
Sure.
I have a couple comments, if that's all right. That 500,000, does that include the site prep, or is site prep additional? Like the pad, the water, IT, all that?
Ideally, this is all in.
So I know I think this is something that we need to do sooner rather than later. I think as long as the budget that we currently have allows it, we should do it, and there's a couple reasons for that. Never mind the fact that we all agree that the conditions that they're in, I think, aren't sustainable for the long term. It's more palatable, in my mind, as a taxpayer, to spend this kind of money on something we're gonna use for a longer period of time, even though there is a break-even point of rental to own. If we're looking at like 350,000 to rent for a year versus 500 to own for 2 or more years, I think it makes more sense to do the 500. But we have a lot of contingencies in here, and I think the only thing we don't have a contingency for is the voters. And I kind of view this as like a contingency for the department, in case it fails to vote on the first round or ever, at least we've done something to invest in the department. And like I said, I think if it fits within the budget that we currently have and we don't need to go to ask for it, I think it's the right thing to do.
Again, ideally, you would rent it, use it during the construction, and then everybody moves into the new building and you can pull it away. But there's no guarantee that you're gonna get the vote. And that's sort
Well,
of a
right,
concern.
let's pick up on what Justin's saying, and I'll take it another level, I think. You mentioned the contingency, you mentioned the sort of return on investment, I totally agree with all of those things. As we get through this process, we may decide we wanna wait a year to bid it, right, with the market, a year or two, right? To Chief's last point, the temporary housing is 20 years old, right? So I think we came into this with one of our tasks being get the current firefighters into a more palatable situation. I think our goal is to use some of the 3.3 million we have to do that. At least I think that's one of our goals. I don't know if it's written anywhere, but I think we certainly talked about it. So it sounds to me like our budget can support it. It sounds to me like we have some options that are feasible. I think we should certainly look into it and try and make it happen. I also think that as we start to figure out how we're gonna present these ideas to the town, I think we presented in that fashion, and that we're taking the money that we had left from the original budget, and we're solving the first problem, which is getting our community members into a situation that's at least respectful, right? And that's done. And if we don't spend another dime on this, at least they're in a better place now than they were before we started this process, right? And then, if we do decide to do it, well then, great, because we've made this investment, they're covered while we're doing it, we've bought ourselves some flexibility through design and construction. Maybe we can use the old ones as construction trailers, we've got the new ones as housing, and we own them on the back end, so maybe we can even sell them and get a little bit of money back. So I think the story's there. At least I convinced myself it is, so I'm all for it. I think we
Yeah, I think so too. I think as long as we can show that it's falling within that 3.3 million. And to me, if you're saying, once you get more than a year, it doesn't make sense to rent it, I mean, construction's probably gonna be more than a year. Even if we bought the trailer showed up day one, it's probably unlikely that construction's completely done and everybody's moved in 12 months later. So I think just purchasing it just seems like it makes a lot more sense.
I agree. I think it's gonna be a no-brainer once we see the numbers. Because when we start looking at the schedule here, and we wanna buy ourselves some flexibility, some contingency, we're gonna wanna buy a year or two in there, and then you've already made your decision to purchase it rather than rent it, so.
And this number's gonna go up at least 6% a year the longer we wait on it, based on what has already been shown to us, so
Yeah, we've got a school project coming, so part of, the goal of moving quickly was to be, I realize that the
Well,
market's,
I could see some people having pushback on that and saying, well, normally inflation is 2%, it's 6% because the market is so crazy right now.
right.
What if you sat on this for a year? Would you actually get a better number?
But then you're maybe competing with a
But
school
yeah,
project.
you're gambling. It's a gamble. It would be a gamble. But I could see someone trying to make that case.
Oh, sure. I think we ought to, I don't think we should do this before we go to the board on the 21st. I think we need to say to them, this is a really important first step we believe we need to take, and we can do it within the 3.3 we have. We're telling you that, we're concerned about the project passing, and we at least want to make the situation better than it is, and hopefully we can recoup something from it. It's a win-win.
what's the, what's the time that it takes for us to say, go ahead, till we get numbers that we understand what it actually costs?
Well, I can do a little bit more research and then, come back to the committee. And then also, we can start preparing the RFP,
Yeah, I mean,
because
that's.
I have some of them from
We're
other
not gonna have a
projects.
bid number by the 21st.
Oh, God, no. But, I mean, telling the
So,
board we are pursuing this actively.
Yeah,
I mean, I think,
There's a sort of a format that you do for these.
I think for me, this is probably the highest priority right now to get this moving, and I would fully support moving ahead with it. as a- But obviously, doing it responsibly, we can't just spend $1 million on it.
It has to be due diligence has to do.
Just so I understand the above the line, below the line thing, if we do go to construction, we do have to add that cost to that 23?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Possibly, depending on where things shake out,
Yeah, I mean, the towns, it's not in our project budget, but it's town money, so, so if our new money is 20 million, because we have the 3.3, then we add the 500,000, so we're at 20,886,000 and change.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to clarify. Yep.
But it's below the line because it's not a part of your project, not to put pronouns.
at
on it.
present.
At present, yeah, I think, we just wanted to separate it, I don't know, maybe taking 500,000 off of the project line made it look better.
If it dropped
I
it to
have no idea.
19,999.
Right.
That's what I've been saying.
That's right.
No, but I mean, in theory, you guys might have nothing to do with it.
Right, we may not,
It's possible.
yeah.
We've gone through it, we've developed on packages, we don't have to.
Right. Yeah, and like,
Someone's gotta do it.
we're here to help you, so,
You and me.
we're here to help you sort of decide where it goes on the site, depending on what this building layout, continues to, develop, so, and we also have to consider, with the town, where's the septic or the sewer
Yeah, we
piece
did
gotta
our
go, so-
design,
So there are.
engineering,
There are things that
utilities.
need to get coordinated, and we'll help with that,
yeah,
yeah.
we can work all that.
So I think what would be helpful that when we do meet with the board is just to have, we know it's not gonna be a hard bid number, but some breakdown of, site prep fee, cost for the double wide trailer. Here's the AE fee that we're gonna spend through bidding. Here's Vertex's fee that we're gonna spend through bidding. It's within that 3.3 million with hopefully some amount to spare. That if the bids come back a little high, it's still within that number.
Yeah, well put.
Yeah.
So I think if we can have that.
Either we need a separate line item budget, or it needs to be rolled into this budget.
I mean, for me personally, I would like to see a separate one, because I kind of look like, to me, it's already coming out of the existing funds and not.
I kind of agree. I think we should treat it as a separate. I think we should treat it as we're funded for a project and we're proceeding with it actively. And at the same time, we've got this other project we're trying to get approved.
Well, and we can do that. I think we sort of showed it because we included the, less the funds in hand on so it's sort of part of the entire project. But if you want something broken out different, we can.
I think we do. I think we.
We're gonna end up at 23,886 if you add it, right? So, just, we need to show that we can afford it now.
But we're really not. It's not really part, that's my point, I think. Sorry, Blake.
The town has to pay for it somehow.
The town has to pay for it, yes, but I think it's a big but. The 3.3 is already approved. We have the right to spend it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think
Everything
if-
else isn't.
I think if we can show, here's how we're spending that, at a minimum, here's how we're spending that 3.3 million.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
to pay the architect, it's to pay Vertex, and it's to buy this temporary housing and get it set up.
And oh, by
Then-
the way, we have $1 million left to put towards the 20.
Right, that comes out to 2.5 million. Here's the cost from from the day we receive bids on, is this amount of money. Then total those and say, here's the total project cost. So if the thing never moves past receiving bids from general contractors, we're gonna spend 2.5 million.
Yep.
I think that would probably be maybe a cleaner way to, I think it's just rearranging your numbers, but.
But I think also, under the temporary quarters, it needs to be a lot more, like, site prep, fees, all it.
Right, yeah, show how that 2 point,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Nothing has been designed on it, so of course we won't have bid in hand numbers.
But you
No,
could
it's
list the
gonna be a
things you gotta
guess.
pay for, perhaps site
Yeah,
prep,
we gotta have
utility
placeholders.
hookups.
It's gonna be a guess, obviously,
Yeah.
but I think we need to just make an educated guess. at it.
Correct. Yep.
Do we need to do anything to like move that forward to get that ball rolling?
I don't think so, I'm just asking.
I think it's be really well prepared for the 21st. Get a green light that we're on the right path and get back to work and make it happen and keep them informed. And then it's get that green light, then Steve and I can work on putting out an RFP.
Okay, so I think if maybe in the meantime, you guys can work on organizing the numbers in that way. I think that would help.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you all have the stomach to continue with the discussion, but we did meet with Eversource today. They did share their programs with us, and I can actually just send a memo to you with their presentation, just kind of explaining it, because it was an initial meeting, and we're gonna have plenty of meetings with them. And the next thing is the mechanical systems, which again, we're at such a high level state right now. We talked about 3 different types of systems with 2 different nuances for 2 of those systems. If it's okay with you, I could put, again, another memo together and send it to you and just say, here's a description of each one, because there's gonna be a lot more further discussion on those as we start getting these things estimated, as we start talking about the pros and cons for each one and how they dovetail into the Eversource program, because Eversource also wants to chime in, since they're giving some incentive money for it, about these types of systems.
Well, I guess, do any of, because I did flip through.
Wasn't that already what we got in their packet
You have it
today?
in the packet.
You do,
Yeah,
you
you
have
have
it in
that
the
already.
package.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I don't understand half the stuff that's in there, but, I guess, is there some option in there versus another option that's gonna substantially change this number? I mean, like, I just know, like, geothermal to me is big money.
Yeah.
So is that gonna, now this is a $25 million project instead of,
Right, so
And
there is
we
some,
need to
there
make
is
that
some
decision.
potential, so if you decided to go with, a full-blown geothermal system, meaning you're designing it to 100% of the heating loads, and you also wanted to do in-slab radiant heating, and you also, to use it for in-slab radiant heating, and you also wanted to heat the outdoor apron, So there are some things that could blow the budget up, but what we're saying is for the 625 we have in there, each one of these options, 1, 2, and 3, work. And then the next thing, incremental cost above that, is do you want to go geothermal? And before you make that decision, I think you're going to want to see some life cycle costs. You're going to want to see the total cost of ownership of the building. In other words, if we're putting that kind of investment into the project in terms of a geothermal system, what are our savings on the back end? You know, if this building's going to be here for 50 years, when does it pay for itself? Is it 20 years? Is it 15 years? Is it 25 years? Like, when do we start now saving money because we made that investment? So, you know, those are the types of discussions we need to have specifically around geothermal and solar. So I would say that geothermal and solar are not in that 625. But those other systems that we're talking about, which are either all electric or hybrid with the natural gas, you know, we believe that those are in the 625, because that's what we talked to our engineers about.
Is net zero in the 625?
No, so the net zero piece of it, again, we want to present to you, because one of the things that Eversource talked about today was, you know, their incentive program for a zero net energy building. You're going to be the first fire station that they ever do, so they're offering some flexibility in their program to you, which includes everything from how does the building perform in terms of energy use intensity, and also how much of an incentive they're going to give you back, right? They got their formula, but because it's a new program, they're willing to work with us. So as we go forward, what we'd like to do, and this is to Blythe's point, you know, we talked about the first thing that we want to do is create a building that drives down the energy costs, right? So we want a well-insulated building. We want to be right on that tipping point of, we've insulated the walls to the point where we wouldn't want to insulate them anymore, which is an R34, and then a roof with an R60, and then underneath the slab with an R20. And, you know, these are some of the things that we don't make up. Like, I can share with you this published information from the New Buildings Institute. Those kinds of things right there, we would suggest you put into the building, but that's getting you on the path of net zero ready. The things that are going to throw you over the edge of net zero readiness is going to be, do you put in a geothermal system or not? What is the HVAC system that you do and don't do? I can tell you that many fire stations are built that don't have in-slab radiant heating. There's a lot of energy that goes into in-slab radiant heating. It's cost effective and it's energy efficient, but it costs a lot to install. Same thing with if you're doing any kind of exterior slab heating, sort of snow melt, if you will. So those types of discussions is we need to, as we take this decision that we made going forward on this particular design, work with our estimators and our engineers to say, okay, you know, let's define what's in the 625 for the client, and now let's define these things that have, remember from our interview, they don't cost any money, and then these are the things that have a 10-year payback, and then these are the things like solar and geothermal that may be more than 10 years, but what is that return on investment? And so we weren't going to talk about that tonight, but what we were going to talk about is the systems that GGD has offered, and the fact that we want to work with Eversource, and that we have a sustainability process that we talked about at the interview, which means we need to give you all the information, not only in terms of how the building operates and how energy efficient it is, but what your cost is up front and what your savings is over the long term. So that's a really quick way of saying we're going to try to make the building as energy efficient as possible. And if it's okay with you, Eversource has offered to accept you into their Zero Net Energy Pathway 1 incentive program. And it's a non-contractual memo of understanding. So if you sign that, you're in, and they will work with us to the point where we either say, hey, this is actually going to happen, or it's not going to happen. What other kind of incentive program do you have? They do have a Pathway 3, which we may qualify for, that isn't as stringent as net zero. So keep this in mind. You're already a stretch code community. So a lot of the things we're going to be doing, you already, as a community, have told us we have to do. And we will, again, identify those things for you item by item, because we want to share this with the community, because it's a great selling point, and it talks about what their investment is actually buying them for the future. It's not only giving them a great fire station, but it's going to give them a fire station that may cost less than a code-compliant building.
If we go path one, there is a feasibility study that we have to pay a fee share for, right?
Yeah, so the zero net energy piece of it, they bring in a consultant, and they just happen to be using a firm called the Green Engineer, which we've had experience with as well. And what that engineer does is he reviews everything that we're doing, and the feasibility piece of that is that he'll look at, for instance, the HVAC system options, and they will chime in on, okay, again, it's all about return on investment, right? If you put this system in, it's gonna save this much energy, so, we want you to do that. And have you thought about this, and have you thought about that? Working with them in the past, I think we find that it's incredibly helpful. It's another set of eyes who is laser focused on energy. They're not, not to put it this way, but they don't care about cost. They don't care about the architecture. They don't care about what the front of the building looks like. It's all about, what's the best window, and where's the best place to put that window when it comes to energy efficiencies, right? Because they're energy engineers, and that's what they do. So the cost of that is they're willing to pay 50% of that consulting fees, up to $10,000. This is a smaller project compared to what they normally work on. I'd be surprised if the fees are more than $10,000 to do this. So I think what Eversource offered today was, they're willing to pay $5,000. If you're willing to pay $5,000, up to $5,000. So if you're willing to do that, then they would get this consultant involved. And that's their Pathway 1 program. In addition to that, you do get some energy modeling done for free. There's a company called DMI that works with Eversource, and we will be doing some energy modeling, and they do what's called a check model. So they will accept our energy model as long as when we submit the eQuest energy model, their energy engineer doesn't say, hey, guys, you missed half the building. So they do have another consultant who checks the energy model that we provide to them. I don't want to rush through this, but I know you've had a lot to think about tonight. And frankly, we'll have more information on this next time we meet.
So we don't need to vote on that tonight?
No, I think there's a lot more discussion in terms of life cycle costs and the pros and cons of each one of those systems that you all need to consider as we continue to develop the building. So that concludes that presentation. With the geotechnical services, I did send in a revised proposal.
This is the next agenda item.
Okay, it is, yeah. I guess he revised the way he described the services because he didn't change his number. But he did explain to us why. He had already given us his best number. I do have a list that he sent me of which drillers he typically uses. He did tell me that he pays roughly $3,500 to $3,800 a day for the drillers to be out there. The rest of the, I think $4,500 is for them to be here with the driller, assessing what's being drilled, and then writing up the reports and the notes based on the foundations. And they did send to us a sample of what that final report will look like.
I forwarded it to everybody.
Yeah. So again, had a long conversation with him, and he just can't do it for less. So I don't know if that satisfies the situation, but that's what we were left with.
I reviewed all of it. I still think the price is high, but if he can't do it for less, he can't do it for less. It's definitely for a single day of drilling and a simple report, probably $2 or $3 grand more than I would typically charge or something like that. But do they have to pay prevailing wage to the drillers?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So honestly, $3 to $4 grand is cheap for that. just think maybe their costs are a little bit higher than I used to see. But again, if they won't bring it down, they won't bring it down. It is what it is.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my opinion too. I actually looked at a couple geotech fees for similar number of holes that we've done, and it was the same sort of thing. It seemed like it was maybe $3,000 high or something. but-
I mean, I went through proposals that I've written for similar
But-
jobs.
At the end of the day, I think it's, if this is the geotechnical engineer that you're comfortable with, geotech is always a pretty big risk on the job. It needs to be someone that we think is good and that you guys are comfortable with. I personally, for $2 or $3,000.
Yeah, no, I mean,
It's not something.
One that's got a great reputation. I mean, there's nothing I can say about them that's bad. They've been around for a long time, they do great work.
So, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
So, ask for a motion that we authorize the architect to retain Sanborn Head to perform the geotechnical services.
Moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Final agenda item,
Minutes,
minutes, unless anybody else has anything.
short, sweet ones from November 3rd.
Right?
One pager.
I reviewed the minutes, didn't find anything out of the ordinary with them. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the November 3rd, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. I think that brings us to the end. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Want to talk about just the
Oh.
next meetings in terms of?
Yes, that's a great point. So, if we're gonna meet next Wednesday, I am actually not available.
So that's the 8th, I'm not available either.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I could Zoom, but I'm in Florida, so.
So, yeah, I'm not even available by Zoom, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, we still, if you're comfortable, we still have a quorum with
Yeah.
5 people. If
That's fine with me. I mean, literally the only other day I would be available is Tuesday, and that would have to be remote as well.
I have a select board meeting.
So, I would say as long as everyone else, and if you can make it by remote, great, then we just keep the meeting and, I guess,
I mean, if you want, we have our draft report coming out on the 15th. We could send you sort of a preview of that, and then hold the meeting on the 15th. I mean, it's up to you. There's just a lot of work for us to do between now and the 15th.
well, I guess, what would we discuss on the 8th? If we met next Wednesday, what would we be discussing?
Just more
Plans.
updated plans. Yep.
Well, maybe if you can send updated plans, everyone can maybe commit to sending back comments.
Sure, we can do that
So that
again.
you're getting the same information, but you aren't actually having a meeting to do it.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah, quite frankly, if we sent you something next Wednesday, maybe we could send you a few, three-dimensional sketches, so you start to see what this looks like in 3D. Your vote tonight was very helpful, because that really allows us to focus on one option, looking at it in 3 dimensions.
Does that work for people?
That works, and then we would meet the 15th, and then actually,
Yeah, that's great. I have a dentist appointment at 5 o'clock, so to get back for 6 is probably impossible for me. Someone can either start the Zoom meeting and I can get here late, or we can go to 7. I hate to make anyone wait later at night, but it's just,
Chris, I'm sure he can start the Zoom
I'm sorry, it's just
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to keep the meeting time at 6. Especially if it goes another 2.5 hours.
I definitely can't do any earlier than 6,
Yeah.
it's a stretch for me to get here for 6, so.
Yeah, I mean,
I can leave someone with the laptop and to sign into my Zoom
Some
account and start
instructions.
the meeting is fine. I'll just get here as soon as I can.
sure, that's fine. Yeah, do you wanna leave it in the this room with instructions?
I'll
or-
either figure it out to either work it out with Aaron or Chris, and clearly,
Chris is the IT guy. I literally push a button on my headset at work to get into meetings.
Chief, how do you feel like being the Zoomer for me?
I can do it.
Alright.
Okay. I think, I mean,
I have Blythe's computer for a whole meeting.
No, it's the town's
Think of
computer, it's
all the
not
stuff
Blythe's.
we can do.
Don't worry, mine's at
Yeah.
home.
It's gonna be a fun meeting.
I mean, I mean, honestly, I
Give you that
think,
much latitude, you know.
I think if, as long as we're not putting you in a bind, not meeting on the 8th, it would probably work out better to meet on the 15th, because I frankly didn't see us really meeting the week before Christmas anyway.
Well, we're at the 21st,
We're
we're,
20, yes, but not a fire station committee meeting also that week.
no, I mean, if you wanted to meet, you know, a little ahead, just to prep, that's one thing.
We'll figure that out on the 15th.
So are you guys gonna put together PowerPoint to show the board for the 21st? I mean, how are we gonna run that?
Yeah, we'll have a PowerPoint presentation.
Let's just go back and forth on that, and I think that's an important thing to share. I mean, we had some great conversations at the working group this afternoon about points to make, about like, you guys thought it was gonna be $550 when you sent in a proposal in July, and now we're at $625 in November, and, you know, we were 30,900, and we got down to 25, 720, I mean, we've got some great stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think reviewing the police station from the drawings that Matt sent us was a great lessons learned about what would have to take place at the fire station. You know, just in terms of renovating that and turning it into a Category 4 building, which happened, you know, you turned a building that wasn't Category 4 into one, and the logistics that takes. You know, I think that, you know, a lot of these things is all gonna be in the report that we're putting together that, you know, hopefully hits all of these high points and these bullets. And to your point about, we have a list of what's, you know, what we've done to the program when we started at 30,900 to where we are now. And especially that net to gross factor, because we've got an incredibly tight building.
Find
at
another
this-
100 to add to that start, because 40 sounds a lot bigger than.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're 31, I guess, sorry.
31,000, yeah.
31 doesn't
I
sound as
could
big
make
as
a
40.
$40,000 program, 40,000
Couple more bays.
Okay, so we're not gonna meet on the 8th then, we're at the 15th. All right, as long as that doesn't put you guys in a bind.
No, we're still gonna have our working group meeting on the 8th. So, you know, we're gonna get more work done and share it with everybody after the meeting.
All right. So then now I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Those in favor say aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
They do in terms of teams, is their teams.